what are these two camps really talking about? And think of this as like the elevator pitch for each one. So to start with germ theory, there's basically three main points, like pathogens are the primary cause, transmission is key, and interventions target the germs. So firstly, just to talk through pathogens as the primary cause, like specific bacteria, viruses, or fungi invade and multiply, leading to symptoms. Koch's work showed Mycobacterium tuberculosis causes TB in over 90% of cases without prior exposure. Okay, so some proof, right? Transmission is key. So diseases are spread via contact, air, or vectors. Pasteur, quote, "I have demonstrated experimentally that the virus of rabies can be transmitted from one animal to another." And admittedly, this led to hygiene revolutions, and people washing their hands reduced maternal mortality by 90% in one particular case. Like, okay, people didn't used to wash their hands. Maybe there's some merit to that, right? And so pathogens are the primary cause, transmission is key, and finally, interventions target germs. So what do I mean by that? Well, specifically vaccines, train immunity against specific invaders. Antibiotics kill bacteria. And the evidence for this would be, I mean, the World Health Organization data. How much do you trust that after the last 5 years' experience? But global vaccination campaigns dropped polio cases from 350,000 in 1988 to 22 in 2017. And it's funny that the pro-vax camp almost always cites polio as the reason that vaccines are good. Now, of course, if you question why a child needs to have 60 jabs before the age of 12, like polio is just one example, and that data set's from 1988 to 2017. Like, what's the case today? And when my wife and I, for example, was researching that topic, there's not one study on a child with no jabs and a child with all the jabs. Doesn't exist. Every single vaccination for an infant gets tested independently, but without them being done in conjunction with all the other ones. Like, talk about, that doesn't make sense, right? How can you tell me that my child is guaranteed to be safe after all of those injections? And funny enough, no one has an answer to that. More on this in a second. And so to get back to terrain theory, what are their core arguments? Well, again, three main points. The body's environment dictates disease, focuses on holistic health, and prevention is done through lifestyle. So, okay, well, that's very different, right? So in terms of the body's environment dictating disease, so a healthy terrain, so I mean balanced pH, strong immunity, low toxins, prevents microbes from causing harm. Béchamp's microisms, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, microzymas, yeah, that's better. Béchamp's microzymas theory, microbes are symptoms, not causes. They morph in response to imbalance. Interesting. So point number 2, so focuses on holistic health. Disease thrives in bad soil, poor diet, stress, pollution. So Bernard said, the constancy of the internal environment is the condition for free and independent life. Now, what data is there to back this up? Well, studies on the microbiome show that bacteria imbalance, like dysbiosis, links to 70 to 80% of immune issues. That's some research done by the NIH. Point number 3, prevention through lifestyle. So you build resilience with nutrition, exercise, and detox. What evidence do we have this works? Well, 2016 study in The Lancet found lifestyle factors, aka diet and activity, prevent 80% of chronic disease such as diabetes, far more than vaccines alone. Now, this is interesting, right? Another data point. US chronic illness in kids jumped from 1 to 2% in the 1960s to 40 to 50% today. Now, this correlates heavily with processed foods and environmental toxins, not just germs. Well, what's the truth? Like every story, there's probably some middle ground. There'll be a bit of truth on one side, a bit of truth in the other, probably. But that's what we have to figure out, and that's what I'm going to do for the rest of the episode. So a lot of experts, they'll say integrate both, right? So use antibiotics when needed, but prioritize terrain to avoid even being in the situation where you might need to use a kind of germ theory focused intervention.